Hello everybody, so this is Haven, and I am doing number 5 now in the Blender for Beginners series, part number 5. I'm going to expand today on how to add geometry to what we're making. Everything that we make starts out with something. You can start out with just a vertex, you can start out with a plane, a cube, a cylinder, a sphere. You have all kinds of different shapes to start out with. The thing is that these shapes do not have the geometry that you need. And what I mean by geometry is if you look at this cube here right now, it has 6 sides and only 8 corners. So if you have this in edit mode, there's really not a whole lot you can make with just this geometry that we have, just these edges and vertices and faces. We need to have more than that in order to create shapes. I mean, what if we wanted to take the top of this cube and bring it down inside almost like a box? Well, you literally cannot do it. Even if you were to scale this in and bring it down, the whole thing just gets shorter. You can't really tuck that in there or make it look like it was hollowed out or anything. And the reason for that is we don't have enough vertices to move around to make the shapes we want. So we really need to learn how to do that. The best way to do that and the smartest way to do that is to start off with a prim, if we can call it that, a piece of mesh, an object with very low geometry involved, like this box. And then we put the geometry, we add it where we need it, where we want it. And a lot of times you're going to use your operators panel for this function. So let me show you what I mean by that. I'm going to delete this cube and I'm going to add a UV sphere. Alright, so this UV sphere by default is made with, as you can see here in the operators panel, 32 segments and 16 rings. Now segments are almost like the apple segments. It takes 32 of them to go all the way around to make this circle. And the rings you can think of like pineapple rings. How many are stacked together to make this profile, this shape? Well, it's 16 of them. So what we could do is we could bring this in and we could hit edit, and this is just too much geometry. You probably won't need this much for things that you're making. So what you're going to want to do is cut down on some of that geometry, and that's going to involve making different types of deletion choices. So here I'm going to hit delete and choose edge loops. And so now I actually have 31 going around. Now this is a little bit of a pain in the butt to try and select all of these and go about deleting what you want to delete to make the shape that you want. What's a lot easier, and if I go ahead and delete this and add a fresh one, I can change that number here in the operators panel. Now the reason that I had to delete that one that I was working on instead of coming back here to work on it was because if you had noticed, this panel changed. And let me change it again just so you're aware. If I go into edit mode, I'm now in toggle edit mode in any settings that would apply to that. I can choose this edge loop and delete it again, and now I get settings for deleting an edge loop. So we never get back those add UV sphere settings again until, of course, we add a new UV sphere. So I'm going to go ahead and add another one, and this time I'll keep it there. I'm going to change the number of segments to 8. Okay, so now you can see it's still somewhat rounded. It's not too bad of a round shape, but it only takes 8 faces or 8 segments to make up that round shape. Of course, 16 is way too much, so why don't we take that down to 8 as well? And now we have a ball or a sphere shape, but we have 1/4 the geometry that we had before. So you can see here now we've got 112 triangles. If I put this back up to 32 and this one to 16, you can see that I have 960 triangles. And the triangles are what is calculated on for a variety of things. The number of triangles is going to make your land impact what it is. There's even limits to like materials, how many triangles can be assigned to a material. Now, that's a little farther ahead of us than we are right now, but we'll get there one day soon. Just so that you know, triangles are not something we want to have massive amounts of. We want to start with the lowest one that we can have, and we will add to it as we go on, okay? So, something else that we want to be aware of is what's up here at the top. Right now, these are called triangles, or tries, okay? And tries are really hard to work with when you're trying to make selections, when you're trying to use certain tools that Blender gives us for adding geometry. It makes things a little rougher, maybe not necessarily just for a ball, but when it comes to other things, it makes it harder to unwrap. Triangles can even play a part in whether you get a good result on weight painting, which is way far down the road right now. So we don't have to talk about all of it, but I do want you to know that triangles are not the best type of geometry to model with. You want to stick with quads. When this quad and this quad and this quad and this one are exported from Blender into a DAE file, which is a mesh file, it's all going to be triangulated. And so you can see here, and it's not working for me. Let me go and do it the long way. I can come in here and I can triangulate the faces, just so you can see that this is the way that it's going to come into SL. And all of these are going to count. So you really want to keep this count down as much as you can. And you'll see how this can actually mess it up in a few moments, or in a little bit. Another thing that we want to be aware of is called n-gons. And n-gons are the ability to have as many edges and faces as, edges and vertices as we want to a face. So let me go over here to another little file that I kind of put together. And I have the 3 different types of polygons that we have. The first, of course, is the quad. That is the 4. Okay. The next is a triangle, and that's the 3. And this one is an n-gon, and this has 8 vertices and 8 edges surrounding it. And then I turned it into tries so that you could see what it would look like when it's exported from Blender. And so this actually has 6 tries to it. So this piece of mesh is 3 times the amount of geometry than this quad here. And this n-gon is going to really interrupt a lot of the tools that we're going to be using when it comes to adding geometry to our mesh objects. So let me go back here, and I'm going to delete this. And I'm going to bring in a cube. And let's start seeing some of the tools that we have, and a little bit more about n-gons and tries interrupting our workflow. And it's going to become pretty evident pretty soon. So you can see here that there is no settings to make more faces or less faces to the makeup of this cube. So we have to add whatever we want to this one. So I'm going to go ahead and tab into edit mode. And just something else that you'll learn inside of Blender is that whenever you want to do something to something, you have to have it selected. So if I wanted to subdivide this cube, I have to have it selected. If I select just this top face, I can subdivide just this top face. There are a few tools that don't require you to have a selection made. We'll see one of those in a moment. But for now, Subdivide, you must have anything you want subdivided selected. So what is Subdivide? Well, Subdivide works only on quads, basically. It works on something else that we'll get to in a minute, but it's meant to work on quads. And what it will do is it will cut every face in half from one side to the other, and then, of course, the third side to the opposite side. However you want to number these or think about them. It's going to cut it in half both ways. So I'm going to hit W for Subdivide. It's our specials menu here, and there's Subdivide in it. Or you can always come here in your tools, and let's see, which one is it? Mesh tools. There we go. You can also find it here in the Subdivide section. So W, Subdivide. And you can see that everything got cut in half. Now, you can subdivide it again, and each one of these little squares, these quads, will get cut into quarters as well. So, W and subdivide. W and subdivide. And you can see that every face gets cut into quarters. Now, that isn't exactly what we want sometimes. Sometimes what we want to do is maybe have 2 cuts instead of 3. So you can see that one subdivide gives us 1 slice in each way. If we subdivide it a second time, we've got 4 by 4 here. What we can do is hit Subdivide and then go into the Operators panel with settings for the subdivision. By default, it is set to 1 cut, so we got 1 going in each direction. We can change this to 2, and now we have 2 going in each direction. If you cut it into 3 cuts, you do see that you do have subdivision done twice on here. It pretty much is equivalent at 3 cuts to 2 subdivisions. Anyway, so you can keep going up and up and up. When you get to 10, it will look like that's the limit, like that's all you can do, but it's not. 10 is kind of a stopping point because subdivisions can add a lot of work to Blender to calculate. It can bog down your Blender depending on what you're doing. It could end up crashing your Blender, and you really don't want that. So a little safeguard here is for Blender to stop us at 10 cuts. But if we click on the number 10 and change it to 11, we can now scroll up to 20 cuts. And if we click on the 20 and change it to 21, we can now scroll it to 50. Again, if you change this to 51, you can scroll all the way up to 100. So you can keep subdividing, but you have to come in here and set the number that you want when it's above 10. Let me go ahead and take this back down to 1 for now. Okay, so we have some other tools here, and we'll look at those right now. And I want you to see one other thing. So here we're going to select just the face of it, the top of it. We'll hit W for Subdivide. And let's look at the tools that we actually have available to us. Let me go ahead and close those down a little bit. So let's take our number of cuts all the way up to 10. And you can see again, only this face was subdivided into 10. What also happened is that this face here now is actually an n-gon because you have all these additional edges and vertices up here. So this is no longer a quad, which means that this is really high in geometry now. This is going to be a lot of triangles. When Blender turns a face into triangles or your mesh into triangles, it makes every vertex part of a triangle. So it keeps cutting this into triangles until every vertex is used all around it. Okay, so back here in the settings, we have what's called smoothness. And smoothness, watch what happens when I adjust this. Just kind of puffs it up there. So that's kind of fun. That's something that you can mess around and play with for different things. We have fractal, and what fractal is going to do is it's going to take every single vertex and it's going to lift it and shift it around a little bit randomly. So there we have something like that happening. So that can get kind of fun. Be careful, that gets carried away really fast. If you like to use the fractal, but maybe you don't quite like this particular way of it being done. We have random seed, and you can just simply click on here and it's changing how those are actually kind of randomized. So that's also a good fun thing. And now if you were to select just the bottom face of your box here and maybe scale it down a little bit, what do you think we have there? Well, if we put a nice texture on there, we could have a box of popcorn, or we can have a waste can full of paper trash and stuff. So with just a subdivide tool on a simple cube, we were able to add geometry in a way that we've actually made an item. So let's go back here for a second into edit mode. Now that whole thing about subdividing and turning things getting turned into n-gons, W and subdivide. So these are still set to, those were still set because when I call them subdivision again, whatever settings were here before usually stay, so we have to change those back. Alright, so now the thing that you have to be careful about is if you're not used to subdivisions giving you an n-gon, what could happen is you can come here and you say, okay, well, I want to subdivide this face now. So you click W and subdivide, but you'll see you didn't get what you expected. This face isn't cut into quarters like the top one is. Instead, what's happened is every edge was cut in half. So from here to here was cut in half and we got an extra vertex. From here to here was cut in half and we got an extra one. We also got one here, and here, and here. So now we have a really messy n-gon, a really messy end to our mesh, and one that we probably didn't want to get. I mean, there may be times where you want to split an edge in half, so you can select it, hit W, and subdivide for that. But that's done on purpose. You can't subdivide an n-gon, and you can't subdivide a triangle. So that's how triangles and n-gons interrupt the ability to use this tool. Now we do have another tool that is kind of nice because it doesn't create n-gons when you add it to your mesh. See, this, unless you do the whole cube, is going to add n-gons. But there's another tool here, and for this one is also the one that you don't need to have anything selected for. It's called edge loops. So I can use hit my control or hold my control key and hit the R, and when I hover over an edge, you see I get this pink loop that goes around our object. It goes all the way around. So this is almost like half of a subdivision. And again, this only works on quads. It doesn't work on n-gons. N-gons will stop this from going around your object all the way. So when I get this pink loop here, I can decide where I want it, hit hit your left mouse key, and now it turns yellow. And before you do anything else, you can actually move this around with your mouse. I'm not holding any buttons right now. It just free flows up the side of the cube. And when I left mouse click again, I can place it wherever I want to. I could also Control R and left click to confirm that I want that edge loop. And then I can right mouse click and it will snap it to the center. So now this is perfectly centered from the top to the bottom. Okay? Now, when I said that we're going to confirm it, what we're really doing is confirming the number of edge loops. Because you can use your middle mouse wheel and you can scroll up on it to make more edge loops. You can scroll down to make less. Can't go less than one though. Or you can use the plus and the minus button on your number pad. And when you get the number of cuts that you want, and you'll see them down here on the bottom, in case you put like 10 of them, or 12 of them, it's hard to count that. Well, you can see them down here in the window. you can left mouse click to confirm that you want those 12. And again, you can move these up or down, but they do stay the same distance from each other. You can't change that right now. And if you right mouse click, it puts them all to center. So now every one of these edges is evenly spaced apart. Again, Control R. You can put as many as you want in. Left mouse click to confirm that number. Right mouse click to set them in the center. Or you can move them around and left mouse click to place it. So that's another way of getting geometry. Something that's kind of fun is what's called edge slide. So if I just shape this box a little bit differently for a second here, and let's say I add an edge loop right here. Well, when I left mouse click it to confirm that I just want the one, watch what happens. It takes the shape of the cube, the width of it and the height of it, as I slide along the edge. It's not changing the shape of it at all. It's just sliding along it. And I can left mouse click to confirm where I want it. Now if I move it, you see that it does change the shape of the mesh. So when you're placing it in your or on your object, you can slide it as much as you want. Now let's say you put this here and you're thinking, oh, maybe I should have put it down here instead. Well, instead of going back and undoing it, what you can do is use your Control E. Control plus E brings up this Edges menu. And in this Edges menu, you have what's called Edge Slide. Now, Edge Slide will begin to work the moment I push this. So, let me click on it, and now you'll see when I move my mouse, it goes back to sliding along that edge, and I can then place it down here if that's what I actually wanted. Now, a way that Blender thinks is that if we have a Control E menu for all of our different edge functions, and that's what this is, we also have one for Control F, which is for faces, and it gives us different things that we can do relating to our faces. We also have one Control plus V for vertices. So these are three menus that you're going to be looking into and finding some really nice tools to work with as you begin to explore Blender a little bit. But of course, it's not something that you need to go ahead and do just yet. Let's get used to the basic tools first. So that's edge loops, and that's subdivision, and that shows you some of the things that you have to work with. Let me show you one more thing. If I were to come here and add an array of edge loops, left mouse click and right mouse click, you'll see that I get another menu here for loop, cut, and slide. I have a number of cuts now, which are 15, and I can actually change that now. So if you did make a certain number of cuts, before you go on to another tool or manipulating this in another way, you can adjust that number of cuts. You can also use smoothness, which is just like what we did for the subdivision. It kind of puffs it out a little bit. What I really like about this is the Falloff. You have what's called different fall-offs, and that's the way that this edge shapes itself. So right now, do you see how it's kind of like curvy like that? That's called the root fall-off. Now if I click here and I choose smooth, watch how that edge shape changes. And if I go ahead and I change it to sharp, or I change it to linear, or change it to a constant isn't in here. I thought constant was. Anyways, you can change it to these different shapes, so that can help you create an object as well. You also have a factor, and it's an edge slide factor, so it will take all of your edges, and let's just bring the number of edges down a little bit. Okay, they're all evenly spaced apart, and I'd kind of like to see a setting that can actually set these closer together if we want to. But an edge slide factor will slide it for you. So you can slide it this way as well as with the Control E. See how I'm just going from one side to the other. There are a few other little things there, but of course, I'll give you something to explore later on as you need it. Right now, we're still working on the basics, so don't try to overwhelm yourself with anything. That's going to be it for now. So practice using your subdivision and your edge loops. A little bit of homework could be for you to take a cube and to use these two tools to give you some geometry to create something. Doesn't have to be anything fancy, but just get your hands busy using those two tools. And don't forget to go ahead and look into the vertices, edges, and faces menu. Look at the W menu just to see what's in there. Like I said, you don't have to really know what they're all for, but just seeing the words, the terms, the names of these different tools and functions is helpful when they start to become familiar to you. The next video is going to be on extrusions, and it's also going to be on the knife tool. And I'm going to show you a few little surprising things with those. So stay tuned, make sure you subscribe, and stick with the series. I'll have you blendering in no time.